Today is our third and last part of grammar quotes for the unit. This is quotes part 3. In this unit, we're going to look a little bit more about the ending punctuation that goes inside or outside of the quotation mark, depending on how it's used, and how we would cite quotes. Now, we've talked about quote citation before. In fact, you used it, most of you, in your essays that you've already turned in. So the last part will be a brief review. But let's talk about some of our other punctuation aside from commas that we talked about last time. Rule 3.9 says, a quote within a quote uses single quote marks. Now, this applies for anything that would get quote marks around it. So, song titles, poem titles, short story titles, chapters within movies, dialogue that's quoted from someone else. Lots of these things could be used within a quotation. So one example, I said, comma, quote, because I'm saying it out loud. My favorite short story is, single quote, The Necklace, single quote, double quote. So I am saying this out loud. My favorite short story is The Necklace. But I also, when I'm writing it, need to notify the reader that The Necklace is a short story. Miss Ordal said, use the citation guide, Ben reminded the group. So if Miss Ordal says this, and Ben reminds this, quoting what Miss Ordal said, we would use the quote within a quote, because Ben is saying this entire sentence here, but he wants to stress that this is the part that Miss Ordal said. So he's giving her credit where credit is due. Insert the needed punctuation here. Excellent. Let's check 3.10. A rule tells us that a question mark or an exclamation point stays inside the quote mark if it is part of the quote itself. So if the quote is an exclamation or the quote is a question, we'll keep that question mark or exclamation mark with the quote. Help, shouted Timmy. I fell in a well. The exclamation point is part of what Timmy shouted. So we need to keep that exclamation point with the words that he shouted. I told the class, quote, notice there's a comma here because we have a signal word. I told the class, quote, The Who have a song called, quote, Who Are You? And because that song title is a question, the question mark stays within the title of the song. Notice I have a double rule here because it's a quote within a quote and a question within that inner quote. Oh my land, we're really starting to get that punctuation in just the right place. Insert the needed punctuation here. Check your work. Two more rules to go, friends. Hang in there with me. Rule 3.11 tells us a question mark or exclamation point goes outside the quote mark if it belongs to the overall sentence and not the quote itself. So we're just going to pair that question mark or exclamation with either the quote if it goes with the quote or outside the quote if it is part of the larger sentence. Why should I read The Scarlet Ibis? Maybe it's a good question. I think it's a fantastic story, so that's why. However, since The Scarlet Ibis doesn't have a question mark at the end of that title, and it's just a short story as part of this bigger question, I'm going to keep that bigger question mark outside of the quotes. It's not The Scarlet Ibis. It's why should I read The Scarlet Ibis? Maybe I'm asking who's saying you can't always get what you want. I want to ask that question. And so I'm going to put the question mark outside of the quotations. The song title is not you can't always get what you want, like it's a question. Instead, I'm asking who's saying that. Give it a try here. Last but not least, Rule 3.12. Cite quotes by closing the quote without a period, then list the author's last name and the page number in parentheses followed by a period. And remember that author's last name will always be in there on the first notice. This number could be a page number, a paragraph number, a line number if it's a poem, or an act in a scene if it's in a scene of drama. I felt like giving somebody a buzz, as you will find in The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, page 59. The quoted part is, I felt like giving somebody a buzz, close quotes, space, open parentheses, last name of the author, space, page number, close quote, period. Subsequent quote, meaning by the same author without changing authors in between. Another quote by that same author can have just the page number, and I'll automatically know that it's also by J.D. Salinger. Quote, the minute I started to laugh, I thought I was going to vomit, close quote. Open parenthesis, page 177, close parenthesis, period. Give it a try on these last two, and then, when you're all set, please use the mixed practice and check your work against the solution station.